My first night on the job started like any other. A man in a grey suit met me at the unmarked gate and checked my ID without saying a word. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even look me in the eye. He just handed me a clipboard with a laminated sheet of paper and pointed toward the dimly lit corridor inside the massive concrete facility. "These are the rules," he muttered, finally breaking the silence. "Read them. Follow them. Don't ask." The gates clanged shut behind me, sealing me in with the sound of finality. The hallway stretched endlessly forward, bathed in flickering fluorescent light that buzzed just a bit too loudly, as if angry to be awake. It smelled like disinfectant and something metallic, something old. Rule number 1 was simple: do not clean. Room 3B. No matter what you hear, no matter who asks, ignore it. I chuckled. I thought it was a joke. Government humor or something hazing the new guy. Rule number 2. If you hear footsteps behind you in corridor 6, do not stop walking. Do not look back. That one unsettled me a bit, but again, I assumed it was just paranoia dressed as policy. The rest of the list was worse. Rule number 4 mentioned a man with no face asking for directions. Rule number 6 told me to empty trash cans only after 2:17 a.m. sharp. Rule number 9 simply said, if you see yourself, run. My fingers gripped the clipboard tighter. This wasn't hazing. This was protocol. Real protocol. The kind they don't explain, just enforce. The janitor before Miff, there even was one, had left behind a half-finished mop stroke on the far wall near the break room. The mop was dry. The wall was stained with something that wasn't coffee, and the security camera above it blinked red once. Just once. Then it stopped. That's when I realized there were no cameras in the halls. None. That I could see. And yet, somehow, I knew I was being watched. I followed the janitor's map, a yellowed floor plan taped to the back of the clipboard, toward the east wing. It was the only area not marked with a red X. As I passed through a heavy steel door labeled C Wing, the temperature dropped suddenly, enough to see my breath in the air. I paused, more from instinct than cold. Rule number 5 echoed in my mind. Temperature shifts are intentional. Keep moving. The hallway narrowed. The buzzing lights flickered faster, and I could hear something faint like whispering, but in reverse. I told myself it was just wind through the vents. At the end of the corridor was a utility closet, my base. Apparently, inside, everything was lined up neatly. A mop, a bucket, sealed bottles of chemicals without labels, a flashlight, and a walkie-talkie with one channel taped over in black. A handwritten note was taped to the wall. Don't respond. To channel 3, it's not for you. I hadn't planned to respond to anything. I was starting to feel like this whole job wasn't about cleaning at all. It was about presence, containment, obedience. The lights flickered off for a full 3 seconds. Total silence. Then back on. My watch ticked over to 12:03 a.m. I hadn't noticed the time change. Rule number 11 said, at 12:03, all clocks will sync. Do not question the discrepancy. It seemed small at first, but something about that time felt like a reset, as if the building exhaled and I had entered a second version of it. I pushed the mop bucket down the hall and turned toward corridor 6. That's when I heard its footsteps. Behind me, slow, heavy, not hurried, not echoing like mine. I froze. My brain screamed to turn around. My heart thudded in my chest. But rule number 2 was clear. Do not stop walking. Do not look back. so I moved. Slowly at first, then faster. The footsteps kept pace, like a second shadow behind me. I reached the intersection, turned left, and stepped into the light of the break room. The sound stopped. I was alone again. I didn't want to know what had been behind me, but as I turned toward the mop closet to regroup, I saw it just for a second, my reflection in the break room glass door. It wasn't doing what I was doing. I stood frozen, staring at the break room glass. My reflection was delayed, like a bad video feed lagging behind reality. It blinked, then caught up. I stepped backward, slowly, heart pounding, pulse in my ears. Rule number 9, reflections may stutter. Do not mimic them. But I hadn't mimicked it, had I? The thought drilled into me like an itch I couldn't scratch. I turned away quickly, fighting the urge to look back again. The building around me felt wrong, not evil, but indifferent, like it had seen thousands of people, like me, and would see thousands more. Disposable, replaceable. I forced myself back to the janitor's closet. The clipboard had shifted on the hook. I hadn't touched it. I checked the notes again. A new page had appeared, handwritten and still wet with ink. Good, you passed. For now, my stomach tightened. I didn't know who was testing me, or what I was being tested for, but clearly, someone or something was watching. The walkie-talkie crackled behind me. I flinched, then remembered the note. Don't use channel 3. I checked the dial. It had moved. Somehow, it was now tuned to channel 3. I hadn't touched it. No one else was here. I quickly turned it back to channel 1, hand shaking, static, then silence. I stuffed it in my belt and stepped back out into the corridor. The lights above me flickered again, but slower now, more like a warning pulse. A low hum vibrated through the floor, and as I turned the corner, I saw it, a door that hadn't been there before, metallic, with no handle, no lock, just a keypad and a line of red above it. Rule number 16 suddenly made sense. Some doors were never meant to open. But if one opens for you, do not refuse the invitation. My fingers hovered over the keypad. I didn't have a code. But before I could do anything, the red line turned green. The door hissed and slid open. Cold air rolled out, thick and sterile. I stepped inside. The lights behind me dimmed, and I knew I had just entered a part of the facility not meant for janitors or humans. The door sealed shut behind me with a pneumatic hiss, and I realized instantly there was no handle on the inside either. No way back. The hallway I now stood in was colder, narrower, and smelled faintly of bleach and something else, something metallic, like dried blood and ozone. The floor was glossy black tile, but it didn't reflect my image like it should have. Instead, it showed a slightly distorted version of me, head tilted just a little too far, smile just a little too wide. I looked away. Rule number 12 came back in. A whisper: if your reflection smiles before you do, it's not yours anymore. I didn't smile. I didn't breathe. I kept walking. At the end of the corridor was another door, this one half open, as if expecting me. Light flickered inside. Not overhead light, but the blue-white pulse of monitors. I pushed it open the rest of the way. The room was some kind of surveillance, hub rows of screens showing hallways, rooms, stairwells I hadn't seen before, but it wasn't empty. In the middle of the room, facing away from me, sat a janitor in the same uniform as mine. Same patch, same clipboard on the cart next to him. He wasn't moving. I stepped forward slowly. "Hey," I called, my voice hoarse in the cold. He didn't respond. As I reached out to touch his shoulder, he turned on his own slow, mechanical, like a puppet. And that's when I saw it. His eyes weren't eyes. They were flat, matte, almost painted on. And the smile, God, the smile looked stapled in place. He lifted a hand and held out a folded piece of paper. I didn't want to take it, but I couldn't move away. My hand moved before I could stop it. I opened the note. It wasn't written in ink, it looked scorched into the page. 3 words, "You're not real." I stumbled back, heart pounding in my ears. The puppet janitor didn't move. The monitors flickered, all at once, showing only static and then a new line of text blinking across every screen. "Return to your route, or be reassigned." The room went dark. Then a single red light clicked on over the exit. I didn't need more warning. I ran. I burst out into another hallway, gasping, but there was no time to process what had just happened. The facility had changed. The walls weren't smooth anymore. They were lined with what looked like pulsing insulation, like veins beneath synthetic skin. Every few feet, the lights above blinked, not randomly, but in a pattern, 2 long flashes, 1 short. Morse code, maybe. I didn't know Morse code. My shoes echoed in a rhythm that didn't match my footsteps, like someone else was walking a half-beat behind me. I refused to turn around. Rule number 4 clawed its way back into my mind. Don't look over your shoulder in hallway, see if you hear. Breathing, walk faster. If you hear footsteps, stop. My heart dropped. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, mimicking mine but just slightly off. I froze. The sound stopped too. I waited, straining to hear, to breathe. Silence. Then, a whisper, not behind me, but from the vent above. Keep going now. I didn't hesitate. I moved, not walked. Moved, as fast as I could without running, because rule number 7 said never to run unless the walls start to sweat. I didn't want to know what that meant yet. I turned the corner and found a janitor cart waiting for me. I didn't leave it there. It had a clipboard on top, but it wasn't blank anymore. There was a note, handwritten in ink that shimmered like oil under the flickering lights. They're watching you now. Stay in character. What character? I was just the janitor. I was just supposed to mop floors, not decode hallucinations. I took the cart and kept pushing. The hallway narrowed until my elbows brushed the walls. My vision tunneled. Every step felt heavier. A low hum started to build from beneath the floor. Not the sound of machines, but something older, vibrating like a warning buried under concrete. I reached the next checkpoint door and scanned my badge. It turned green. The door didn't open. It spoke. A deep, gravelly voice, not through a speaker, but directly into my head. You're early. Wait, wait. For what? The lights dimmed, and the door began to breathe. In, out, expanding, contracting. I stood still, praying this was still part of the job. It wasn't. Nothing in the rules said the doors could breathe. The breathing door exhaled one final time and slowly opened with a groan like old metal bones waking up. Beyond it, the lighting was ... wrong. Not dim, not bright, just wrong. It flickered in perfect intervals, like it was syncing with my heartbeat. But my heart was racing and the lights stayed steady. I stepped through, pushing my cart, and instantly felt the air thicken. Not hot, not cold, just dense, like walking through invisible cobwebs spun by something that knew I didn't belong. The floor tiles changed color subtly as I moved forward. White, pale green, bone. I tried not to think about that last one. My cart squeaked once, loud, unnatural. The hallway responded. A faint rustling sound from the vents, like dozens of paper-thin wings unfolding. I reached for my walkie, but rule number 9 screamed in my memory. Never radio control from corridor D. If you need help, keep moving until the walls stop whispering. That's when I realized I hadn't noticed the whispering until it stopped. And now it was silent. Too silent. The pressure on my chest grew heavier, like something was standing on it from the inside. At the end of the hallway was a door marked in faded red tape. Sublevel access, restricted. I wasn't supposed to go down there. I knew it instinctively. But the floor behind me began to pulse with a wet, squelching sound. I didn't look back. I opened the door. Inside was a stairwell. No lights, just an amber glow leaking from the bottom step. My hands shook as I pushed the cart aside. The stairs weren't labeled with numbers each. Step had a different word etched into the metal. Entry, welcome, regret, forget. I descended slowly, reading each word as I passed. When I reached obey, the temperature dropped. The amber glow below shifted to crimson. I hesitated on the step labeled forgiveness, but the stair beneath it suddenly vanished. Just gone. A black void in the concrete. I stepped over it and landed on admit. At the bottom, I expected a room. Instead, there was only a mirror. A tall, freestanding mirror in the middle of a circular chamber. No doors, no vents, just that one thing. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't synced with me. I blinked. He didn't. I tilted my head. He grinned. My reflection should not have smiled. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. But he did. Slowly, deliberately, his grin widened beyond what was anatomically normal. His lips stretched too far, teeth too perfect, too white, too many. Then he raised his hand and pointed behind me. I froze. I hadn't heard a sound. The chamber had no doors, no openings, no echo, and yet something was now there. I could feel its presence pressing against the base of my skull, radiating cold and heat at the same time. My reflection kept pointing, and then it mouthed a word I couldn't hear, but I understood it. Run. I spun around, half expecting nothing, half expecting something unspeakable. But there was only the stairwell again, open and flickering like it had been waiting for me to look away. The mirror behind me shattered not, exploded, not cracked, just dissolved, like the glass gave up trying to hold reality together. The air pulsed, and suddenly the words on the stairs were gone. Just concrete now. But as I climbed back up, each step felt heavier, as if the facility didn't want to let go. I made it back to corridor D, breathing like I'd run a mile, and something had changed. The walls were whispering again, but this time I could make out syllables. They were chanting something in a loop, but the words weren't in English. Maybe they were, just not for me. Rule number 12 came back hard. If you descend a staircase that doesn't exist on any map, don't ever admit it to control. Just keep mopping. So I did. I grabbed the mop I had dropped, dipped it into the bucket, and began cleaning a spot that wasn't dirty, just moving, pretending, surviving. The lights stopped flickering. The hallway stretched longer than it had any right to be, and for the first time that night, I felt watched not by security, not by cameras, but by the building itself, like it was trying to decide if I passed some kind of test or failed it catastrophically. I kept mopping the spotless floor, more out of instinct than duty. when I noticed something strange on the wall. A new clipboard hanging from a hook that hadn't been there before. It held a single sheet of paper, written in the same typed format as the original rules I'd been handed on my first night, but this one wasn't numbered. It simply read, "Supplemental Protocol, effective immediately. You are now being monitored for compliance. Do not engage the red door." There were no red doors on the map, but I knew better than to assume that meant anything down here. Before I could even look away, the hallway lights dimmed into a pulsing crimson and the sound of machinery hummed to life beneath my feet. Something massive, deep below the floor, was awakening. I stepped backward, toward the elevator, but the floor behind me was now endless. The hallway stretched like rubber, walls twisting just slightly, almost imperceptibly, like they were breathing. Then I saw it. At the far end of the corridor, moments ago, had been a wall-stood A door that hadn't been there before. It was matte red. No handle, no peephole, just a solid crimson door pulsing like a heartbeat. My gut screamed. Every nerve in my body flared. Rule number 4 had said, "Do not interact with any doors that change position." But this wasn't about movement. This was about something worse, something intentional. The door wanted to be noticed, and somehow I knew that I had read the rule, that I understood. The pulsing grew louder, matching my heartbeat. I turned away, focusing hard on my mop, but I could feel the air around me grow thick, metallic, almost like blood in water. Something behind that door was trying to bargain, offering safety, answers, escape. All I had to do was disobey. One disobedience, one crack of the handle, if it even had one, and this nightmare could end. But I knew the truth. The rules weren't written to protect the facility. They were written to protect me from what the facility contained. And that red door wasn't a mistake. It was bait. I forced myself to look away from the red door, turning on my heel and walking in the opposite direction, even though my entire being screamed at me to look back. Every step felt like walking through molasses, the air behind me thick with tension. Like a predator was breathing down my neck. I didn't run. I couldn't. I knew if I so much as broke into a sprint, whatever was behind that door might take it as an invitation. When I finally turned the corner, the light shifted back to the cold, sterile white I'd grown accustomed to. The red door was gone. The clipboard was gone. Everything was back to normal, except me. I wasn't the same. I knew now that the rules could change, and worse new ones could appear at any time. That meant this wasn't just a list. It was a game, and someone or something was watching how well I played. I returned to the janitor's office, shut the door, and sat down hard on the metal stool. I reached for the rule sheet, reading every word again, looking for hidden meanings, invisible ink, anything. And that's when I noticed the signature at the bottom. It wasn't a name, it was a symbol. 3 intersecting circles, almost like a Venn diagram, but distorted, warped at the edges like something tried to erase them but failed. I hadn't seen it before. It wasn't there on my first read. That symbol was new, and I'd seen it before on the underside of the elevator's control panel when I accidentally dropped my mop bucket the first night. Back then, I thought it was just a maintenance mark. Now, I wasn't so sure. My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the office door. 3 precise taps, then silence. I froze. No one ever knocked. There were no regular staff during my shift, no managers, no security, no anyone. And besides, rule number 7 said, If someone claims to be a coworker, verify their ID. If they have no ID, they are not a coworker. I stood, slowly, unsure whether I should answer. Another knock, slower this time, almost hesitant. Against my better judgment, I cracked the door open. A man stood there in a janitor's uniform identical to mine, down to the patch on the left sleeve. That read custodial division, his eyes were sunken. His expression was flat. But what made my blood run cold was the way his arms hung limp at his sides, not swinging naturally, almost like he had forgotten how to be a person. "Hey," he said in a voice too casual for the sterile air of the facility. "You, the new guy?" "I am," I answered, not moving. "You got ID?" He blinked slowly. "Don't need one. We're all the same here." That wasn't the right answer. He should have left. Rule number 7 was clear. I started to close the door, but he put his foot forward, just enough to keep the door from latching. "Don't be rude," he said, his voice still eerily calm, like he was reading from a teleprompter. "We have to stick together in places like this." Then he smiled. Not a real smile, a rehearsed one, like someone had shown him a photo of what smiling should look like, and he was trying to replicate it. I didn't say another word. I slammed the door, locked it, and backed away. He didn't bang or shout. He just stood there. Quietly, I turned off the lights and sat in the darkness for what felt like hours. When I finally dared to peek through the small glass window, he was gone, but he'd left something behind. A folded piece of paper slid perfectly under the door. I opened it slowly, hands shaking. It was a copy of the rule sheet, but with 2 changes. Rule number 7 was crossed out, and in red ink beneath it were the words, "They learn." Below that, a new rule. Rule number 17. If you encounter a version of yourself, do not engage, do not acknowledge, do not follow. It does not end where you begin. My heart dropped. I looked over at the wall-length mirror across from the lockers. For a second, I swore my reflection blinked twice while I only blinked once. I staggered backward from the mirror, knocking over the metal stool in the process. The clang echoed like a gunshot in the silence of the janitor's office. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at my own reflection. It stared back, motionless, a fraction of a second too slow, like buffering reality. I blinked once more. It blinked again, but the timing wasn't right. It wasn't following, MIT was predicting me. I waved my hand cautiously. It mimicked me, but something in the rhythm was off, like it was struggling to keep pace. I reached for the light switch to turn it back on, hoping that bright fluorescence would ground me. As I flipped the switch, the lights came on in the room but not in the mirror. My reflection was still standing in darkness. A cold sweat rolled down the back of my neck. The mirror version of me didn't look panicked. It looked calm, too calm, and worse, its eyes didn't match mine anymore. Mine were wide with fear, darting nervously. His were glassy, vacant. He was watching me like I was a puzzle to be solved. I backed away slowly, reaching for the door, never taking my eyes off the glass. As I turned the handle, the reflection smiled. I hadn't smiled, not even close. The door flung open and I ran. No map, no destination, just the primal need to get as far away from that thing as possible. I didn't stop until I hit the western corridor 1 I hadn't cleaned yet. The floor tiles were darker here. The overhead lights flickered intermittently, as if the electricity in this wing was unsure of itself. I turned a corner and saw a door slightly ajar. its identification plate removed, leaving only the outline of where it once was. A faint hum came from within. I pressed forward, curiosity fighting for control over fear. Inside, I found rows of old server racks, massive towers of machinery from decades ago, blinking lights, spinning fans, and on the far wall another mirror. But this time, it didn't reflect me. It reflected the janitor's office, the chair I had knocked over, the rule sheet on the wall, the blinking light from the hallway beyond. But I wasn't in it. I was staring into the office, and there was no one there. Just the empty stool and the paper that now seemed to glow faintly. I turned to leave, but something on the glass caught my eye. Letters etched into the mirror's surface so faint you'd miss them if the light hit wrong. They said, "He's in the wrong side." My stomach churned. I remembered rule number 17. If you encounter a version of yourself, do not engage, do not acknowledge, do not follow. That rule wasn't just a warning. It was a status update, a heads up that I was now at risk. I sprinted back down the corridor, but the layout had changed. Hallways intersected where they hadn't before. Some doors were gone. Others had appeared, completely out of place. A sign above one of the doors flickered erratically between two labels. One read exit, the other read lab C. I opened it. Behind the door was a stairwell, spiraling downward into total darkness. There were no lights, no sound, just a cold, damp draft wafting up from the bottom, and then footsteps from below, rhythmic, deliberate, coming closer. I backed away, and the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me in the stairwell. The lights above me fizzled out one by one. The only thing I could hear was breathing, not mine, something deeper, ragged, wet. Then, just as the final light above me went dark, I heard it, my own voice, whispering from the bottom of the stairwell. "You shouldn't be here." My blood ran cold. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement of fact. A grim confirmation that I had crossed a threshold that could not be undone. I didn't wait. I ran back up the stairs blindly, hands feeling for the walls, lungs burning. The stairs seemed to stretch longer and longer with each step, until I burst through a door I didn't recognize into a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and ozone. The walls here were glass behind them, rows of cots with unmoving bodies, uniformed men and women, janitors, all of them, lined up in perfect rows, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Their uniforms bore the same patch as mine. Some even had my name stitched into the breast pocket. As I walked the corridor, lights flickered on above each pod, like sensors detecting my presence. Each body twitched faintly as I passed. One of them, a man who looked identical to me, opened his eyes and locked onto mine. His lips moved, no sound, just a whisper on glass. "Switch back." I stumbled away. There were too many questions, too many layers. What was this place really? A facility, an experiment, a prison, or all three? My head spun. I needed to find the janitor's office again, the original one, if it still existed, if I still existed. I retraced my steps with a desperation that bordered on madness, trying to remember how I even got here. The hallways all looked the same, knob-ledged walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, and doors that either wouldn't open or led to places I had no memory of cleaning. I passed a janitor's cart that wasn't mine. It had the same model, same scratch on the side, same blue water bucket, but the mop was soaked in a reddish-brown liquid that had already dried into sticky streaks. I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to. Every second that passed made me feel like something was pulling further away myself, maybe. My reality. I rounded a corner and suddenly found myself back at the break room. The vending machine still blinked, showing the same error code. The coffee pot was half full. The light above the microwave flickered with the same annoying pulse as when I first arrived on shift. It was like time had folded in on itself, repeating a scene like a broken tape. But then I noticed something was different, my reflection in the microwave door. He wasn't drinking coffee. He wasn't standing still. He was walking toward me. I spun around. Nothing. I looked back at the reflection. He was gone now. I backed into the hallway again, and for the first time, I seriously considered calling out for help. Not to the staff, not to a supervisor, but to whatever watched this place, because something was watching. I could feel it. Not the way you feel when you're being observed by a person, but the cold, clinical weight of being monitored. Like the walls had eyes, and they were writing down everything I did. I returned to the hallway and tried the emergency stairs again. This time, they didn't spiral down. They only went up. Each step creaked slightly under my weight, the kind of sound that made you feel like the building itself was reacting. At the top was a single door, marked authorized only. I didn't have clearance. I didn't care. I pushed it open and I wish I hadn't. Inside was a massive room filled with identical desks, each with an old, bulky computer terminal. Dozens of workers sat silently, typing, but there was no sound of keys being pressed. Just movement. They typed into blank screens, their eyes wide and glassy. Every once in a while, one would stop and tilt their head, as if listening to something behind the wall, then resume. I stepped in slowly. No one acknowledged me. That's when I noticed something worse. They were all wearing janitor uniforms, identical to mine. I moved between the aisles, looking at their faces. Some were too pale. Some had tiny wires disappearing into the base of their skulls. Some were familiar. I reached one desk and nearly choked. The man sitting there looked exactly like the version of me I'd seen in the mirror. The one that smiled. He wasn't typing. He was just staring at the blank screen. His lips moved, silently. I leaned in closer. He whispered, "You're late." And then the screen in front of him lit up with a single word, switch. Suddenly, the lights in the room dimmed and a low-frequency hum began to rise from somewhere beneath the floor. The other workers didn't react, but I felt it, a pulling, not physically but mentally, like my thoughts were unraveling and being sucked toward something. I turned to leave, but the door I came through was no longer there. Just a blank wall. No seams, no hinges, no escape. That's when I remembered rule number 22. If a room doesn't exist on your checklist, you were never meant to enter it. I began to panic. I looked for vents, emergency exits, anything but the room was sealed, airtight. And then the reflection of myself in the blank computer monitor turned to face me. I wasn't moving, but he was. He raised a hand and pointed at me. His expression darkened, and then, slowly, he typed something onto his keyboard, delete. Every screen in the room turned red. Every terminal now flashed the same word, delete. One by one, the workers began to slump forward. Heads hitting keyboards, lights going out above their desks like stars dying in sequence. I screamed and slammed my fist into the wall, trying to break through, but it was solid. I backed up, unsure what to do, when suddenly the screen in front of me flickered. A new prompt appeared. Do you wish to continue? And below that, 2 options. Yes, no. I didn't understand what would happen either way. But before I could choose, the screen typed something by itself. Too late. The lights went out. All of them. I was in total darkness, listening to the final keystrokes of the man who looked like me, until even that fell silent. Then, faintly, I heard footsteps. Not many, just one pair, approaching from behind me. Closer, closer. A whisper followed. It's your shift now. When the lights came back on, I wasn't in the same room anymore. At least, not physically. It looked the same rows of desks, old terminals, blank screens, but there was something different in the air, like static had seeped into the oxygen. The bodies from before were gone. So was the other version of me. The walls pulsed faintly, like they were breathing, in and out. I backed toward the nearest desk and noticed a keycard sitting next to the keyboard, labeled Level 5 Access. That didn't exist on my facility map. There were only 4 levels, or so I'd been told. I grabbed the card and ran toward what looked like a shadow of a door, barely visible in the far wall. The moment the card touched the reader, a loud hiss echoed and the door slid open sideways, revealing a hallway I'd never seen. The walls weren't the sterile white anymore, they were black, with faint glowing lines that pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat. My heartbeat, every step I took seemed to echo louder than the last. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath in front of me, forming clouds that dissolved far too quickly. Then I saw the camera. It didn't blink, it didn't move, but I felt it turn toward me, like it wasn't recording, but watching, judging. I turned the next corner and found a heavy steel door, unmarked, except for a keypad that asked for a passphrase. I didn't know it, but as I stood there, the screen blinked and a message appeared. Speak your truth. My truth, I whispered the only words. That felt right. I don't belong here. The keypad clicked. The door opened. Inside was not a room. It was a chamber, circular, stone walls, ancient and cold, not matching anything else in the facility. In the center was a single desk with a monitor. No chair, just the screen, already on. It showed a live feed of me standing in the chamber. But the timestamp was off by 17 seconds. I watched myself move on the screen before I had moved in reality. I reached for the desk. On screen, I was already doing it. Time wasn't just warped. Here it was predictive. The monitor flashed again, and new words appeared. You weren't supposed to see this. Then, rule number 31, the rules are not for you, and just like that, I understood. The rules weren't made to protect me. They were made to contain something else to make sure I never found it. Every strange event, every redacted page in the manual, every glitched hallway or recursive stairwell was all part of a containment system. I wasn't the janitor. I was the variable, the anomaly. I stumbled backward from the desk, my pulse racing. The camera in the corner of the chamber whirred softly, and the floor beneath me began to vibrate. A platform, slowly rising, taking me upward into a shaft filled with light. Blinding, sterile, humming with energy I couldn't describe. As I ascended, I passed rooms that I had no words for. A chamber filled with dozens of identical copies of me, all frozen mid-step, as if caught between decisions. A room where time reversed, playing the same 10 seconds of someone screaming, again and again and again. And one room empty except for a table with my name carved into the wood. I closed my eyes. This wasn't about cleaning. This was about replacing, assimilating, observing, and I had broken protocol by noticing. When the platform stopped, I was standing in what looked like an office. No windows, a desk, a badge on the table read Site Coordinator. Behind the desk, a man sat, pale, hair slicked back, eyes too bright. He smiled and gestured to the chair across from him. I didn't sit. He said nothing, just stared. Then he leaned forward and placed a folder on the table. On the front, transfer request, approved. Inside were photos of me, cleaning, sleeping, entering rooms I never remembered being in. The last photo was of me in this very office, sitting across from him. Timestamp, 10 minutes from now. I looked up, trembling. He finally spoke. Congratulations, you've been promoted. I asked him to what? He just smiled wider. You'll find out once the new janitor clocks in. The door behind me clicked open. I didn't need to turn around to know who stood there. I felt the exact same fear I saw on the first night. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't the main character in this story. I was just the last guy who thought he could read the rules and survive. And someone else had just started their shift. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The silence from behind me wasn't empty, it was loaded, thick, a pressure against my skull. Whoever had entered the room wasn't breathing. Or maybe they were, and I just couldn't hear it over the pounding in my ears. The man across from me, the Site Coordinator, leaned back in his chair with a serenity that made my skin crawl, as if this moment had played out 1,000 times and I was just another tick on his checklist. Sit down, he said again, this time to the person behind me. The chair beside me creaked. My knees went weak. I was sitting across from myself. Not a clone, not a mirror. A version of me that looked just slightly wrong. The skin was smoother. Eyes a shade too glassy. Posture too perfect. He didn't blink. I opened my mouth to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The Site Coordinator pushed another folder across the desk. This one read, Merge Protocol Initiated. He slid a pen toward us. My copy picked it up without hesitation and signed. I didn't move. Your acceptance is not required, the coordinator said, tapping the folder. Only your presence. I reached for the pen. My hand shook. Something in me screamed not to do it, but I had no idea what would happen if I refused. That's when the lights flickered. The hum that had surrounded us suddenly warped in tone, deepened into a mechanical groan, and all three of us froze. That's not part of the protocol, the coordinator muttered, standing. My copy tilted his head, like he was hearing something I wasn't. The wall behind the desk rippled. Not opened, dribbled like water reacting to wind. Then a hand reached through, long, emaciated, too many joints, not human. My copy stood, calm as ever, walked toward it. The coordinator shouted, "Stand down. You haven't been cleared for," but it was too late. The ripple widened into a full vortex, sucking air, papers, light sound. My copy stepped in without hesitation. The room imploded into noise. Sirens I'd never heard before, alerts, flashing breach containment failure, red lights strobing across the ceiling. The coordinator grabbed a phone from the desk, screaming codes I couldn't understand. I backed into the far wall, my limbs refusing to obey, my brain still, replaying what I'd seen me walking through that rift like it was calling him home. Then the vortex closed, the silence returned, but something was different. I looked around, the furniture hadn't moved, but the colors were wrong. Muted, desaturated, the folder now read deceased. my name, my photo date. Today, I blinked. The man at the desk was gone. The desk itself, covered in dust, old, cracked, abandoned. The window behind it, which hadn't existed before now, showed a landscape I'd never seen. A red sky, no sun, black spires in the distance. I wasn't in the office anymore. I wasn't in the facility. I turned around and saw the chair I'd just been in, empty, but behind it, another camera watched silently. It whirred once, and then the screen on the wall lit up with 6 words I'll never forget. Welcome to the observation zone, subject 12. My legs buckled. This wasn't a glitch. This was a test, not of strength, not of intelligence, but of obedience. The rules weren't about staying alive, they were about staying predictable. And I had just broken the one rule they never wrote down. Don't think for yourself. The observation zone was unlike anything I had ever imagined. It wasn't a room or a series of hallways. It was a landscaper, cold, geometrically impossible expanse where walls met ceilings at shifting angles and gravity changed depending on where you placed your foot. The sky overhead was blood-colored, static, like a television tuned to the wrong channel, and yet it was somehow alive, moving, rippling, watching. I wandered forward, pulled not by logic, but by the pulse of the place. The floor hummed beneath, each step as if measuring my presence. After minutes, maybe hours, I reached a raised platform with a single chair in the center, and what looked like an old CRT monitor floating above it, wires dangling like black vines. As I approached, the screen flickered on. There I was again. Not a live feed, not a reflection. A version of me, somewhere else, cleaning the same hallway I had started in when all of this began. Except he looked different. He moved like he belonged. No fear, no confusion. A message blinked onto the screen. Do not interfere. This version is stable. I tried to step away, but my legs locked in place. The chair turned slowly, beckoning. I didn't sit. I couldn't. Another message flashed, begin syncing sequence, and suddenly I felt it, like invisible hooks digging into my thoughts, aligning them, syncing them to something that didn't want to be understood. Memories I'd never lived began bleeding into mine. A woman's voice laughing, a job interview I'd never attended, a wedding ring on my finger, then screams, fire, sirens. My head pounded. These weren't mine, but they were becoming mine. The screen now displayed 2 timelines, one labeled active and the other retired. I was in the retired one, the cast-off, the discarded data point, not the janitor, the test. I shouted into the void. What do you want from me? No answer, only another screen lighting up beside the first. This time, it showed someone else. Not me, a woman, late 20s, wearing the same janitor uniform I had been given. She looked terrified, walking through the facility's east wing, a new test subject, a new replacement. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. But then something changed. She stopped, looked straight into the camera, into me, and she mouthed 3 words. Help me escape. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't just observation anymore. This was replication. The facility wasn't maintaining security, it was building loops. Endless iterations. Versions of reality layered atop one another. Some broke down, some didn't. And those of us who asked too many questions, we got retired. The static sky above began to flicker again, faster this time. The walls shifted. curled inward. Another message blinked across every screen in the room, over and over. Loop stability at risk. Purge incoming. I ran. I didn't know where, only that I had seconds, maybe less, before this entire zone collapsed or reset or erased me entirely. As I sprinted toward what looked like a stairwell carved out of shadows, I glanced over my shoulder. The girl was still on the screen, mouthing the same words again. Help me escape. And for the first time since I arrived, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a veritable, a flaw in their loop, and I was about to make them regret letting me survive. This long. The stairwell wasn't built for human use. The steps were uneven, spiraling at impossible angles, some shrinking into nothing, others stretching like taffy beneath my feet. I wasn't climbing, it felt more like I was falling upward. As I moved, I could feel the purge protocol closing in. Lights behind me dimmed in a wave, one by one, like a shadow chasing my breath. Every inch I gained felt stolen, and yet I pushed forward. For her, for the message. Help me escape. I didn't even know her name, but somehow I knew that if I reached the control hub, I could break this cycle for both of us. At the top of the stairs, I found a steel door that shimmered like liquid. It had no handle, just a scanner and a single word etched into its surface: access. I pressed my hand against it. Nothing. Then I remembered the syncing sequence. If they'd already merged my memories with a version that belonged here, maybe that version still had clearance. I reached into my pocket, a janitor's ID badge, but not mine. It had a different name: Eric L. Novak, Systems Custodian. The moment I held it up, the door hissed open like a sigh from something long asleep. Inside was a room bathed in blue light, hundreds of monitors, keyboards with unmarked keys, server towers blinking like fireflies in the dark. In the center stood a single terminal with one prompt on screen: input command. I didn't know what to type. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. But my eyes were drawn to a side-screen live footage of the girl again. She was in the break room now, hiding behind a vending machine, clutching a wrench like a lifeline. Something was hunting her. Not security, not staff, something else. Then the sound came. Not from the speakers, from the walls. A deep, vibrating groan, like the building itself was breathing. I glanced at the terminal and typed, "Override Protocol 001. The screen paused. Then a new prompt appeared. Define subject to override. I didn't hesitate. Subject ID, Novak Eric L. The screen flashed red. A warning, subject already retired. Irreversible error. Replace target. I erased the line, typed again. This time, override loop integrity. All subjects, and hit enter. Everything stopped. The hum, the blinking lights, even the cameras froze. A silence fell over the control hub so complete it felt wrong, like sound had been deleted. Then a soft beep. Loop integrity compromised. External path unlocked. A small panel on the far wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage, lit by a single pulsing red light. I didn't know what was on the other side, but I knew it was real. Not a loop, not a test. A way out, but I couldn't take it yet. I typed one last command. Redirect path to subject number 782G, active. The screen showed her again, the girl, watching as a section of the break room wall split open, revealing the same red-lit corridor. She hesitated, then she ran for it. I watched her disappear into the light. Then the system gave me a final prompt. Exit sequence available. Initiate. And I paused. Because behind me, I heard footsteps. But I hadn't opened any other doors. Whoever or whatever was behind me wasn't human. And it knew I wasn't supposed to be here. I didn't turn around. The footsteps behind me were slow, deliberate, each one pressing down like gravity itself was shifting. I could feel its presence, a weight in the air, thick and ancient, as if the walls were recoiling from whatever had just entered the control hub. I kept my eyes on the screen. Exit sequence available. Initiate. It blinked at me, as if waiting for my decision. But this wasn't just about escape anymore. It was about understanding, about breaking something. Far older than me, far deeper than this place. I typed, "Who am I?" The screen flickered. For a second, it showed my face, except it wasn't just me. It was a dozen faces, overlapping, morphing, all janitors, all with the same eyes, same uniform, same ID. Then a line appeared beneath. Iteration. 47. Designation. Contingency. Cleaner. Status. Breach aware. I wasn't the first. I was just the first to remember. Another prompt. Override cycle. And behind me, a whisper, but not in words, just sound. A static-laced frequency that made my vision pulse and my stomach turn. I knew I couldn't stay. I knew I had to act. Fast, I typed. Override cycle. Execute. The screen flashed white. Then everything went black. No lights, no sounds. Just the feeling of falling, not through space, but through memory, through time. Through every version of this place that had ever been built, destroyed, reset, rebuilt again. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the janitor's closet. Same mop, same checklist, same faint hum of the vending machine outside, but something was different. I stood up, walked to the break room window, and saw her. The girl, not on a screen, not running for her life, just standing there, drinking from a paper cup, looking right at me. She gave a small nod, then turned and walked out the door. I didn't chase her. I just stood there, watching. The clock read to 47 a.m. shift change. Or maybe not. Maybe it was the beginning of another loop. Or maybe it had finally ended. I reached into my pocket and found a slip of paper I hadn't put there. It had only one sentence written on it, in neat, blocky letters. You broke the rules. Now you make them. The rules were gone, but the danger wasn't. I walked back to the closet, picked up my mop, and began my rounds. Not because I had to, but because something was still watching. Something that hated unfinished cycles. Something that only let the aware live if they kept pretending. And me, I was done pretending. So I wrote new rules. Rule number 1. Always clean in a clockwise direction. They don't like when you loop backward. Rule number 2. If the lights flicker 3 times, do not move. It's scanning. Rule number 3. Never open room. 1 for B. It's not there to be opened. Rule number 4. If someone speaks to you in a voice you recognize, but you haven't met them yet, do not answer. It's trying to finish your story for you. Rule number 5. Don't look for the cameras. They're not where you think they are. Rule number 6. If you hear humming from inside the vents, leave the room immediately. Even if it's the control hub. Especially if it's the control hub. Rule number 7. If someone leaves a note in your pocket, follow it. Even if it means breaking the others, because this place doesn't run on logic. It runs on loops. Loops that remember. Loops that watch. Loops that adapt. I don't know who built this place. I don't know what they were trying to contain. But I know this. I was hired as a janitor, and now I'm the last one left who remembers why the floors keep getting dirty, even when no one walks them. Why the cameras blink at empty halls. Why the control hub resets every third night. Because this place isn't broken. It's designed this way, and I'm not supposed to be here. But now that I am, I'm going to clean up everything. One rule at a time.